Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget, the makers of the original Play Couch.
I have to be hopeful, and I have to know or believe that the kids who are going through this will someday be adults who will realize that it was wrong.
Parenting doesn't come with a script, but it does come with lots of questions. I'm Elise Hugh, journalist, mom, and your host for Raising Us, a podcast from A Kids Co. Every week, we break down big, timely topics so you can have honest, meaningful conversations with your kids. Because these conversations, they matter. And every time we show up for them, we're not just raising thoughtful kids, we're raising us, too. On today's episode, we are diving into a topic that's stirring up a lot of conversation in schools and communities everywhere: banned books. We keep hearing about books getting challenged. These are books that tell important stories, that show different experiences and perspectives. But what if, instead of being afraid of these stories, we started seeing them as a crucial way to really understand each other and the world around us? In order to help us talk with our children about banned books, we're going to hear from two really interesting guests. Later in the episode, Dr. Emily Knox will join us. She's an expert on banned books and is currently the interim dean and professor in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. But first, I'm sitting down with Jason Reynolds. He's a New York Times bestselling author of many, many award-winning young adult novels and poems, including All American Boys and Long Way Down. Jason talks about his own experience of having some of his books banned and challenged. But first, we're going to start with his personal journey with books as a kid. Jason Reynolds, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us. And Jason, why don't we go back to young Jason? Because you have talked about feeling like you didn't really see yourself in the books that you read. When did it click for you that some stories, like the ones of your own experience, just weren't reflected?
Early. I can't give you an exact time, but I would say whenever I was supposed to be reading books on my own. So it's that fourth grade, something like that, fourth or fifth grade, when you realize like, I don't connect to Old Yeller, or I'm not connecting to, right? It's like the books about white children and dogs or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And not because, you know what's interesting? Because I love this question, because I think there is a cheap way to talk about it, and then there's a more nuanced sort of way to talk about it. And I think what a lot of us say is like, well, I didn't see myself. Well, you know, I was a boy with a dog.
Yeah. There's
right?
elements of yourself that were reflected.
Sure. Like I had a dog, right? And I was a boy, but I think we underestimate the value of detail. I think we underestimate the value of texture. Right. And what I was truly looking for was texture and detail and some of the like the fabric of my community or the fabric of my family. The overarching themes are the overarching themes, right? They're universal truths that are hard to sort of refute. But I think sometimes we dismiss or we poo-poo the idea that a kid might want to know the kind of sneakers that the other kid has on in the book. Or that the kid wants to know what the mom looks like and if the food she's cooking is connected to the food he knows. Or if the neighborhood reminds him of the neighborhood that he lives in, right? So the fact that he has a pet is a really incredible thing, but all the other details don't add up. And therefore,
Right.
I couldn't grab a hold and keep my grip.
Yeah, I get it. What do you feel like got you into it, got you into literature and writing?
I always tell people I came through the back door. You know, for me, it was writing first. You know, I read the rap lyrics of my favorite rappers as a kid, and it made me want to write. Right. It made me want to express myself in this way, not as a rapper. People always think that I mean that I was a rapper. I wasn't a rapper. I never rapped.
Okay.
Right. That wasn't what was happening. I was far too shy for that as a young person. I was more fascinated with the way the language looked on the liner sheet. Right. The way it looked, right. These sort of blocks, like verse 1, chorus, verse 2, chorus, vamp, right. This idea that like there was structure and the way that the English language was being manipulated through slang and dialect, depending upon where you were from, how Southerners could like bend the back syllable of a word to make it rhyme, to make it fit. I can't explain the magic that I felt as a kid. Like this must be what it felt like when like Spielberg saw the train wreck in that first film that he went to go see, and he saw that
Mhm.
train crash, right? And
Mhm.
what it did to sort of his eyes and how it changed his life,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what it did for me. It rearranged everything I thought was possible when it came to a thing that up until that point I had taken for granted, which
Yeah.
was reading and speaking, let alone writing.
Yeah. So fast forward to grown up Jason, you now
Mm.
have quite a catalog of books. Do you want to talk a little bit about them for folks who might not be familiar or know the books but don't know you?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a I don't there's a lot of them. I'm probably most known these days for Ghost and the Track series, or Long Way Down, or All American Boys, or the Stunt Boy books.
Yeah.
Look Both Ways, right? There's a Spider Man, of course, Miles
Yeah.
Morales books,
Yeah.
uh, Stamped. Like there's a lot of them, and I think ultimately what they are is just love letters. I think about all of this as still just me being little Jason trying to figure out how to best express himself in a way that feels good to me,
Mm.
that sounds good to me, like the music that I grew up loving,
Yeah.
that has some sort of infectious quality, right? That's catalytic in a way. I think I want kids to sort of start a book or start a sentence of mine and feel like they kind of have to keep going, like using literature as chain reaction to kind of carry the reader on. And I think all my books kind of have that quality. They're explorations of very normal people doing very normal things. But to me, there is magic in the mundanity of our lives. I
Yeah.
actually think that our normalcy is where the extraordinary lies. And so these are all just slice of life stories about little Black kids.
So they're just slice of life stories, as you're saying, about little Black kids, and yet a number of them have now been challenged or successfully banned. All American Boys seems like it's faced the most pushback. What was your reaction when this first started happening?
There's always anger. I was banned from book number one, right? I've been challenged since my very first novel. So there's a part of me that you do sort of it becomes expected in certain ways. It's kind of like, all right, I know there's going to be some pushback, but like to make it clear that it never feels good. There's this idea that like a banned book is sort of a gold mine,
Mm.
and I think that is a perverse way to look at it. I actually don't feel good about being a part of the banned book club. I don't feel good about my books sort of being on this list, because what it's actually doing is it's robbing lots of young people from access to these books. I live on the East Coast, you live on the West Coast. We can sometimes take for granted the access that we have, right?
Mm.
That perhaps, yes, these books might be banned in certain schools and this, that, and the third, but the kids in my neighborhood can get to there is a way to get to the library. Then the libraries are everywhere, right? The
Right.
public library.
Right.
And also they're not being banned as much in DC or in New York
Right.
or in
Right.
Philadelphia or in LA, right?
Right. Right.
But if you're in the middle of Iowa, or if you're in Mississippi or Georgia, or if you're down in Fort Lauderdale, right? We're talking about a very different thing. And to pretend like those children aren't still our children just because their parents disagree with our work,
Right.
I think is I actually think is it turns the work into a kind of exploitation, because it questions whether or not you actually love the reader, or do you love sort of what the work might actually bring to you. If I care about the reader, then I have to care about all of them,
Yeah.
including the ones that might be going through this. So I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm saddened by it all, but I also know there are a lot of great people who are fighting the fight.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so I'm also hopeful, and maybe that's naive at this point, but I have to be hopeful, um, and I have to and I have to know or believe that the kids who are going through this will someday be adults who will realize that it was wrong.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, as an author, haven't put down the pen. You're still writing about issues like racism and social justice. What drives you to keep going and continue to put out stories that you think are really important?
You know what it is? Honestly, everything besides those issues. I think everything despite those issues. What
Mm.
drives me is that in the midst of racism, in the midst of violence, in the midst of abandonment, in the midst of sort of mental health and all the other things that we can sort of qualify as issues,
Mm.
there is laughter, and there is childhood, and there is fun, and there is the swimming pool and summertime and the ice cream truck and family reunions and Sunday dinner and riding bikes and double dutch and playing, ding dong ditch, and right, like that's what's actually happening in the lives of children, right? The other things are looming, but they feel more like shadows in the eyes of children than the actual body. Right. And for me, my job is to write both of those things, but to always make sure the shadow is just a shadow and to show the child as the main ingredient of this beautiful story.
Love that. Love that. What have been the reactions of kids to your more challenged or banned books? Which reactions kind of stick out to you in your mind?
Oh, I think I'll tell you about my favorite story.
Okay.
I was down in, I believe, Virginia Beach, and I'd given a lecture on, I think, All American Boys, or one of the Stamped or All American Boys, whichever one. Both of them were banned. They were number 2 and 3 on the banned list that year.
Whew.
And I finished my speech and I go to Q&A, and a middle-aged woman raises her hand. I mean, it shoots up as fast as, nobody else was ready yet. And her hand was up. I call on her and she says, it's all your fault. You're the racist one. You're the reason that these issues are happening. You're the reason why we would never get over these things, right? And just sort of lambasts me in front of all these people. And they started to boo her, but I, shut that down because I actually believe that she has a right to cuss me out. She has a right to say whatever she needs to say to me, right? And so I created space for her to get all this out, and she does. And then I say, I appreciate what you say to me, but I don't owe you an explanation. So we'll move on to the next question, right? I'm not going to dignify this with trying to explain to you anything that I don't actually have to explain to you. But you do have a right to raise your hand and say what you need to say to me.
Yeah.
And I moved on. The very next question is a teenage white girl who raises her hand and says, Mr. Reynolds, honestly, my question is, I've never experienced anything like this. I don't know anything about police violence. I've never seen it in my community. At least I don't think I have. And so it feels so far away and so strange to me. Can you help me, maybe explain to me how this happens and why this happens, and what this might feel like? Wow. Now, this happened. This was back to back.
Yeah.
In one instance, we have a person who is so afraid of the conversation that the only thing she can do is lash out at her because of her discomfort. And the other person, who is 50 years younger than her, is curious, and compassionate and patient and willing to sit with the discomfort of not knowing and ask a question to then better know, instead of assuming that her discomfort meant that what I was saying was wrong.
Right.
And that is sort of why I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah. And what are you hoping happens when this dialogue, this kind of discourse happens at the parent to kid level or the teacher to student level?
I just think at the end of the day, books aren't scary. And I think, if we have to be honest about, we have to be honest about parenting, right? If you think the book is scary, then you should read it with your kid. And furthermore, you also, as a parent, do have the right to parent your child how you want. You just can't parent everybody's child. Like you're not my mama, right? You can't parent all the kids, but you get to opt your child out if that is what you need or want, right? I'm not interested in harming any child or triggering any child, sort of, any corner of a child's psyche. I'm not interested in digging up any pain, or that's not the goal here. The goal is to make sure that we're creating, that we're growing children into better versions of us, right? That they're better than we are. And in order to do so, we have to lean in sometimes to some of the discomfort that all of us are still afraid to lean into. So all I want is for parents to have conversations and process information with their young people. I want them to be and if they decide that they have issues with our books, I hope they have the same issues with their video games and with YouTube and everything else. If we're going to ban one, if the problem is with the storytelling of a book, I hope you don't mind your child playing war every single day, hearing bombs and grenades in their ears through their headsets, while some kid across the world is calling them epithets. Right? Some kid across the world is calling them expletives and cursing them out and calling them names, and they're doing the same thing. I hope you're in the room for when all of that is happening. I hope you know with their Twitter accounts that they are not supposed to have, because their generation doesn't believe in Twitter. But if they have one, that's where the pornography is, to the parents listening. I hope you know that. I hope you know what's happening on YouTube. And right, so I feel like there's so much emphasis on the book, and to me, what that speaks to is the power of it. The power that a book might have for young people to play around in the sandbox of thought and imagination, so they might come to their own conclusions, scares parents to death.
You mentioned there have been a lot of folks who are fighting the fight. It's happening at the school board level, it's happening at the individual librarian level. What do you want parents out there and listeners just to know about this current era that we're in with regard to banned books?
To
And
fight to the, you know what it is? I learned this recently. Every library has a suggestion box. This is a
mhm,
thing that I did not know.
'kay.
And a librarian told me, she said, every library has a suggestion box. And if people really just went in there and put the books, like if people just went in there and said, like, I want this and this, I want this and this, and we were organized enough to do that, just put it in the suggestion box. How uh how that it doesn't seem like it would help, but how that could be such a big help.
Hmm,
In the same way that two parents could shut it down, right? 50 parents could bring it back.
wow.
Perhaps, right? Like small thing. I'm thinking about the small things, the doable things.
Mhm,
I think that's one. I think also we got to start showing up to everything, every board meeting, every PTA meeting. We have to make sure that we express that we are not afraid of literature, and that it is imperative that our children are given an opportunity for intellectual rigor that challenges life outside of their own. This
yeah,
is not a bad. Your discomfort does not mean that you are unsafe.
right,
And also, those of us who make these books, like myself, love your kids, whether you believe it or not. We are not interested in harming your children.
right.
Furthermore, furthermore, I think it is necessary to say that though I don't believe that reading often creates empathy in adults, even though we say that's what it does, I don't always adhere to that idea. I do, however, believe that it creates empathy in children.
Hmm,
And if we want our young people to be whole and to be unafraid of the world that exists for them, and to be unstuck from the few blocks in which they roam as a 12-year-old, and to know that the world actually is their oyster, but an oyster that they do have to pry from its
yeah,
shell,
yeah,
right? They're going to need to have the primer that is literature.
yeah.
Like, this is the way that you do this.
That's beautiful. Author Jason Reynolds, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So, how do we help our children navigate a world with really complex ideas and differing viewpoints when so many books are being challenged and banned? Dr. Emily Knox has some answers. She's a passionate advocate for intellectual freedom and an expert on banned books. Her research really highlights why it's so important to protect our access to a wide range of stories and voices, especially in a world that sometimes tries to shut them down. I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Emily Knox, who is the interim dean and professor in the School of Information Sciences at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. She is also the author of Book Banning in the 21st Century, among many other published books. Dr. Knox, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
We're delighted to have you. You are the expert in this topic. So, just to begin with, when did you first learn about the idea of banned or challenged books? What's your earliest memory of it?
Oh, I learned this very young. My mother was a high school librarian, and
Mm,
we always observed uh, banned books week. And so she would bring home the lists and bookmarks. And I think that started, I can't even remember when I would not get that information. So this has always been of interest to me.
what does it mean for a book to be banned?
So I actually think about banning in a couple different ways,
Okay.
but what I talk about are what I call practices of censorship. So these are the four R's,
Hmm.
which are redaction, restriction, relocation, and removal. And I'll focus on banning, and that's what most people think about when they think about removal. But removal can mean a lot of different things. It can mean removing a book from a library collection. It can mean removing a book from a classroom. It doesn't just mean like the book can never be seen again. It actually means that it's being restricted, that people aren't able to access it the same way they were before.
What happens culturally when we learn that a book has been removed? Does it actually kind of have the boomerang effect of making the book maybe more popular or more desirable? I'm just thinking of, like, when I see a sign saying, like, "Don't step on this," I always want to step on the grass or whatever I'm not supposed to step on. So, what has been the cultural effect of book banning so far?
So there's several different effects. The effect you're talking about is called the Streisand effect,
Hmm.
which is based on Barbara Streisand. She didn't want people to see her house, but when she talked about her house, all sorts of people went out to see it. And this does happen with some books. Most notably, this happened when Mouse by
Mm.
Art Spiegelman was banned in Tennessee. Actually, Amazon ran out of
Oh
copies.
my gosh.
That's one example.
Yeah.
But what also happens are what I call more passive things that happen. So these are things like an author will say, you know, I'm not sure about writing about this. I'm worried what will happen if
Mm.
I write about this. So there's like this chilling effect that happens when books are banned.
Yeah.
Also,
Right.
librarians or teachers might say, I don't know if I want this book on my shelf or in my classroom because I might get in trouble. Someone might be upset. So you have both things happen at the same time. You both have a bigger spotlight on some of the books, but not the books that are not as popular. Um, and you also have people worry more about what they can say, what they can do, how they can teach.
Yeah. Bring us up to speed with the landscape for challenged and banned books now, today in 2025, and under the current Trump administration.
So, where we are now is actually kind of a continuation outside of just the books. We really see that people are targeting schools and libraries themselves. So, they're targeting the institutions that have these books. So, you can see sort of like the books as like a first wave,
Mm,
and then the actual challenge towards thinking about what does it mean to have a public institution like the library or a public school. And we can see that there have been people saying, well, I don't know if I want my money to go to support this library because I know it has thousands of books in it, but I'm worried about these smaller number of books that it has. I feel like they aren't adhering to what I think is the right thing to do. And therefore, I don't know if I want this library to exist at all. So that's really what we see happening right now. People still challenge books. This is a very localized thing that happens.
yeah.
But we actually see people saying things about the actual schools or libraries themselves as a whole.
Why is the administration attacking not just books, but also education, the Department of Education, institutions of knowledge and information?
Because knowledge is power, and often how we convey knowledge in this society is through books. Even in this age of ebooks, which
Yeah.
are still books, we are really dedicated to the idea that books should be true and truth should be in books. When you go to school, what do? You read a
Yeah.
lot. You might not be reading just books, you might be reading chapters from your textbook or reading something on the whiteboard that the teacher has, right? But reading is incredibly important. And the way that people react to wanting to have control over other people is by controlling what they know. And
Mm,
this means controlling what is in books. So it's actually very direct. We actually see this around the world when people who want to be in control and control other people rise to power. They want to control knowledge, and therefore they must control books.
Are there general areas of knowledge, general topics or subject areas that seem to be falling under what the administration wants to censor these days? And what are they?
Yeah, so Carrie H. Robinson calls these things difficult knowledge. This is knowledge that adults like you and I have trouble talking about with each other,
Hmm,
much less with kids. So these are things like sex, violence, drugs, all those sorts of things, gender. they all kind of get wrapped up into the same thing. But what they are things that like I myself might have trouble having the vocabulary to talk about.
Sure, sure.
And then how do I talk to about it to a 5-year-old? That's even more difficult. But what Carrie H. Robinson also says that you must be able to talk to kids about this because kids have their own agency and need to be able to describe their worlds, their lives, their bodies, what's happening to them. So when you think about it, we talk about things like diverse books, but what we actually mean are books that talk about what we call the human condition, like
Yeah.
what it means to be alive.
Yeah.
They're very particular types of books that often have a political edge, not necessarily partisan political, but they talk about society often using critical language, for example. And these can be very difficult topics to talk about. They are very intimate topics, so things like sex and gender, or they are painful topics, so things like genocide, violence, or they are topics that can destroy families, like drugs. So those are the books that we really see that are targeted right now.
So if I'm putting myself in the perspective of someone who is challenging these books, challenging um, kids being able to read about it or have discussions about it, then what do I want instead? Like, what fills the void?
Yeah. So the thing about people who challenge books is that, as people say, they aren't even wrong, right? In fact, the books that they are challenging do change how people might think about a particular topic. They
Mm,
are, in fact, quite powerful. So, what do people want instead? Often they want silence. They want this not to be discussed at all. So, it's not even that they want an alternative, although sometimes they do, but often that alternative will be something that doesn't discuss sex and gender at all, or it'll discuss it in a very what we call heteronormative way, right?
mm,
Like this is just what you should see. But often they don't even want that. They just want the cleanest, what we call clean books that you can possibly see for everyone. So not just for their kids, not for just for themselves, but for everyone. And it's actually this drive towards, I would prefer that people not discuss this. And this is because they're worried about what might happen if these conversations open up. It's
yeah,
very possible that your kids might have different values from you. And I don't even mean this in a left right sort of that way.
sure.
Like it could be that I've been saying like you are very progressive and your kid reads The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand and becomes very Randian, right?
Yeah.
Like it's actually can be just like that, that books open up other possibilities for people. And when you try to take that away, you're actually trying to take away those possibilities.
Mm, mm. I love the way you put that, which brings us back to the premise of this podcast, which is how do we talk to our kids about this moment in book banning and book challenging? How do we break this down for them and help them understand this?
So I think the most important thing to think about is that, let me say to the parents, you know, your kids are their own people. They have their own agency. They have their own inner lives that you actually are not privy to. Like they live their own way.
Yeah.
And I think the important thing to know is that all kids have the right to freedom of expression. They
Mm,
have the right to know about themselves and about other people around them. So Rudine Sims Bishop talks about books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And we often get stuck on the mirror part,
yeah.
but also books are windows, and kids have the right to see what other people's lives are like. And they have a right to express how they understand those lives. Um, so that's really what I think about is really thinking about kids having agency, that they're their own people, and that they have the right to freedom of expression.
And rather than removing books completely, what are better ways to encourage and facilitate age appropriate reading?
So the best way to do it is to be more comfortable talking about uncomfortable topics. That's really the best thing to do. I once had a librarian speak to me, and she said she realized that in order to support these books, she had to be more comfortable talking about sex and race and things like that.
Yeah.
And I think opening up the conversations and acknowledging that they're difficult. And also, I think saying, I don't have all the answers, which is hard to do as an adult, but saying, we're going to work through this together. And you can have guardrails, right? You can say, like, I just don't think this book is quite right for you, my child. It's a different thing when you say this book isn't right for someone else's child, right?
Right.
But I absolutely agree that parents, that's part of being a parent, is that you have boundaries for your kids, and you are welcome to enforce those boundaries with your kids. But it's when it moves away from your own family to other families where it becomes very problematic.
So then I guess this is more of a case-by-case basis and more individual advice. So if you don't want to answer, you don't have to. But do you have any advice for families whose kids want to start reading banned books or have heard about a book like Mouse and want to read it explicitly because of the Streisand effect that you're talking about?
I would say read it yourself first. That's the best thing to do. Mouse, that's actually a good example, is actually a quite difficult book to read. Not because the prose is difficult, but because of the topics that they have to deal with the worst in humanity. The way Art Spiegelman shows it, though, actually invites you in to have this discussion. So I would say just read the book first. You might not be able to do that with every single book, but you can also read Goodreads reviews on a book, right? Like, you can see what people say about it. But I think that's the best thing to do, is just read the book yourself first.
Are there any final takeaways that you want to leave with?
So I actually want to thank Kids Co. I'm on the board of the National Coalition Against Censorship, and we published a book called A Kid's Book About Banned Books. I actually donated that book to the library here at the University of Illinois when I became a full professor for the children's collection. I just want to encourage everybody to take a look at it. It's a very good explanation for kids about what's going on right now with banned books.
Fantastic. Dr. Emily Knox, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you to Dr. Emily Knox for joining us. Regardless of where your children may be in their reading journeys, just remember, talking with them about banned books can be tricky, but worth the effort. Opening ourselves up to different stories and keeping an open mind is what really makes room for everyone to explore, learn, and grow. For more tools and resources, be sure to visit us at akidsco.com. Thank you for listening to Raising Us. If this episode resonated with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you get your shows. Raising Us is sponsored by Nugget.